Right now, two opposing strategies for displaying wealth are competing for dominance. One relies on hyper-visible, logo-heavy consumption, the other on understated minimalism. The average internet user spends roughly 7 hours a week immersed in these feeds, navigating algorithms optimized to maximize engagement with these signals. This prolonged exposure creates a paradox in the psychological literature. For certain demographics, interacting with this content predicts a decline in mental health, yet for others, frequent use correlates with higher self-esteem. Understanding this contradiction requires a look at sociometer theory, a framework from evolutionary psychology. Sociometer theory defines self-esteem as an internal gauge, an evolutionary reading of our social standing and acceptance within a group. This hardware evolved to track status in small, local communities. When forced to process the global hierarchy of modern platforms, the needle spikes into the red. The resulting psychological toll and the current shift in how wealth is displayed are linked by a specific statistical mediating variable. The mental health crisis and the rise of stealth wealth are two downstream effects of algorithms interacting with this evolutionary gauge. A study in Frontiers in Psychology recently examined young adults to measure the relationship between Instagram use and global self-esteem. This statistical model plots their initial finding. Frequency of use directly predicted higher global self-esteem, bypassing typical links to depression. Building a network and receiving validation provides a baseline boost. However, looking strictly at frequency of use is incomplete. Clocking time spent records how long a user is on the app, but it misses the actual content they are consuming during that time. Researchers use a mediating variable to identify the specific mechanism that explains how an effect occurs between two primary data points. Mapping the impact of social media requires looking past screen time and isolating the specific psychological pathway triggered during the scroll. That mediating variable is upward social comparison, evaluating oneself against targets perceived as superior. Because algorithms prioritize curated content, they guarantee users are exposed to these targets. This reveals the negative indirect path. Frequent exposure to these upward comparisons drives down global self-esteem. When this mediating path is accounted for, the data shows that more time spent on the platform leads to more upward comparisons, which results in a net loss of self-esteem. This specific mechanism correlates with a measurable increase in depressive symptoms across multiple studies. Curated feeds often signal to the sociometer that the user's actual social ranking has dropped. These platforms force our evolutionary hardware into a state of continuous calibration against statistically impossible standards. When the internal sociometer registers a failure in the digital hierarchy, users often attempt to hack the gauge. Conspicuous consumption, or flexing, acts as a defense mechanism to artificially inflate perceived status. Research on the Indonesian digital landscape highlights how young demographics use luxury displays to counteract insecurity and secure immediate peer validation. This drives the extremity of social comparison. The gap between economic reality and the digital target is widening. Standing out in a saturated feed requires hyper-escalated signaling, leading to a crazy rich phenomenon where wealth displays are increasingly detached from reality. This psychological pressure normalizes hypermaterialism and wealth disparity, occasionally leading to digital investment fraud as users try to shortcut their way to higher status. Each attempt to flex creates a new extreme upward comparison for another user to internalize. Flexing is an algorithmic adaptation, a desperate attempt to satisfy an evolutionary gauge by shouting into an infinite void. As the aesthetics of wealth are replicated by the masses, affluent demographics are shifting their signaling strategies. When a status signal, like a prominent logo, is widely adopted, it loses its ability to indicate high status. The 2025 dominance of quiet luxury and stealth wealth is a strategic pivot characterized by the deliberate absence of visible logos. Vain data suggests that 60% of high-income shoppers are prioritizing quality and craftsmanship over aesthetic flash. Value is shifting towards intellectual luxury, where the status comes from heritage, craftsmanship, and premium materials. This coding of wealth requires specific knowledge to decipher, locking out those who only recognize overt branding. stealth wealth acts as a sociometer defense strategy. Established elites are moving the goalposts to a game that the average user cannot easily replicate. The data connects our impulse for group standing to digital algorithms, leading to a chain of psychological harm, desperate flexing, and the shift toward quiet luxury. The long-term psychological outcome depends on the mode of engagement. Passive consumption, scrolling without interacting, leads directly to upward comparisons, causing a drop in perceived status. Active engagement, posting and connecting, bypasses the comparison trap, satisfying the sociometer's need for community acceptance. Mitigating this impact involves recognizing that the digital hierarchy is an artificial construct designed to keep users engaged. Navigating status in the digital age requires acknowledging how this hardware is being manipulated and choosing to change the rules of engagement.